We're going to be talking about wild fish today. I got a checklist as always. We're going to be going over the cool different fish, some rules and regulations, some safety. But what I was saying before was, pro tip, don't do a water change a little before you go live because my tank is all messy right now. So pro tip, don't do a water change before you go live. But this is just why we're not in this room right now. This is the water leak I had. I thought it was this little pipe in the wall. It ended up being this pipe in the concrete. So as you can see, it was right next to the fish tank. And then Bo, my dog, has been relaxing on the cool concrete floor. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for sticking with me. But enough of this crap. Let's get to the wild fish collecting. Oh yeah. So I really like getting out there and collecting wild fish. Depending on where you're at in the world, it may be easier. But to be honest, down here in Florida, really lucky to have a lot, and the weather's pretty fair most of the year. But even you guys up in the northern states, out west, and in different countries, there's a lot of cool opportunities to go collecting. It may not be the exact same experiences that we have down here in Florida, but a lot of this information is going to apply to you no matter where you're at. I'm going to talk about rules and regulations really quickly first. I actually got a comment the other day about fishing licenses. In Florida, you just need a regular fishing license and you can collect. They're considered non-game fish, all the species that we normally go after. So just having a regular fishing license and you're good to go here in the state of Florida. And I expect it's similar in most states. Lucky for us, the non-game fish, referred to as most people as minnows. Everywhere I go collecting, people are like, oh, what are you catching? Minnows? Minnows? Those are minnows? I'm like, yeah, they're minnows. Which is exactly what I thought everything was a minnow up until about 2 or 3 years ago. But lucky, typically the rules and regulations regarding these smaller non-game fish that we're interested in, or at least that I'm interested in, they're more lax, so there's not too many limits. Obviously, you want to only take what you need, and my goal is to, take only a few specimens and then, breed them out. But you definitely want to check with your local area, but typically a regular fishing license and you're good to go. Let's see here. I have the prices for the fishing licenses in Florida. Obviously, if you're a resident, it's cheaper than if you're a non-resident. But definitely you check it out wherever you go. One other thing to keep in mind is typically invasive fish. If you catch an invasive fish, and we're going to go over some native and some invasive fish a little later, but if you catch invasive fish, it sounds cruel, but you're not supposed to release it back. You're supposed to dispose of it humanely, as opposed to releasing it back into the wild. And then plants, typically collecting plants, they may be subject to laws as well. So even just you plant nerds out there that want to collect plants, definitely check with your local laws. I know that down here, I have a commercial fishing license, and then I have what's called a freshwater frog dealer's license, and that allows me to collect plants and sell fish. I want to talk about NANFA real quick, which is this organization right here with these stickers. Actually, big shout out to Josh Blaylock, a subscriber. He had sent me this flag fish sticker, which is one of my favorite native fish. I have a 20-gallon long with a community of them. But NANFA is an awesome organization. They're non-for-profit. They're all about education and conservation of North American native fishes. That's what it stands for. Their 2020 convention, which I'm not 100% sure I'm going to get there, but it's in South Carolina next year in the end of March, like March 20th through the 22nd. Definitely check out NANFA. I've been connected with them a lot via Instagram. On Instagram, I usually, whenever I post a native fish, I'll use the hashtag NANFA, and I think some of their members have found me that way. And it seems like a really cool organization. I think it's $30 to join. I haven't joined yet, but I probably by the end of the year. I don't see why not. Thanks everybody for sticking with us in the stream here. Gonna get into the fish in a minute here, but I want to talk about like safety real quick, and what you should be aware of. Every time I'm going out or I'm out, people are always like, oh, gators, man, you gotta be watching for gators. And although it's true, it wouldn't be nice to run into a gator out in the wild. I'm more scared of snakes. And in Florida, if you talk to most Floridians, it's usually this poisonous snakes that you want to be worried about, especially since we're kind of usually hanging out on the edge of the water. Usually gators aren't going to bother you. I'm not saying you shouldn't be aware, and you should always go in groups. That's another reason, stay safe, go in groups. I'm talking to you, Jay, Aquafunk. I know you go out solo sometimes, but definitely a good idea to at least bring a buddy to keep an eye out. And at least when you're down here in the southern states, keep an eye out for gators. But to be honest, the real thing is snakes. I have yet to really run into a snake out in the wild. I've seen gators, but only small ones, and nothing bothering us. I'm gonna jump into the chat. How do you feel about least killifish? I think least killifish are cool. I keep some. They're the smallest library in the world. If you're not familiar, Heteranda formosa. They're pretty prevalent here. I'd say in most places that my friends and I go collecting, they are like the second most popular or most prevalent species, whereas the gambusia or mosquito fish are typically the most popular no matter where we go. Not always the case, but usually those two species are number one and number two in terms of quantity and how many we find. So we talked about safety. Let's jump into equipment here. This is where I got a bunch of props. The dip net that I use, that I prefer, and big shout out to Corey over at Aquarium Co-op who picked these up. This is a Jonah's Aquarium dip net. They're not cheap. They're like 60, 70 bucks, but they are like built solid. As you can see, the netting is in the rim here. So it's not like on the outside. It's actually inside the rim, so you can bump this thing up against rocks and kind of really get in there, scoop up underneath things. It's nice and deep. It's a nice, the mesh size is decent. Even your smallest fish, like usually the pygmy sunfish, my friend Jose caught one in these nets. So they're made for that stuff. But if you're just getting started out, like I was just a few months ago, my 1 year anniversary of my first ever collecting trip was just earlier this month, and me and my buddies were using these guys from the dollar store, and we not as sturdy. Clearly, as you can see, the netting is on the outside of the rim. It gets holes really easily. But hey, listen, $1 butterfly net at the dollar store, it got the job done. Alternatively, friends of mine like to use pool skimmers. So something like a pool skimmer is nice. You don't get as much depth, okay? But it's a nice size and it's cheap. You may even have one laying around. You can get a little better net like this. This is a little upgrade from a butterfly net for a few bucks at a hardware store or something like that, maybe at a Walmart. But in my opinion, if you have one of those Jonah's dip nets, you will have a lot better luck. It's just wider. It's just better. Besides nets, something I also use is a trap. Now, this is actually a crayfish trap, I believe, because the hole is quite big. I need to invest in like a minnow trap, so the smaller fish that we're after don't actually, get out. I've had some success catching species in this, but I would definitely recommend a minnow trap as opposed to a crayfish or crawfish trap like this one is. What else do we have in terms of collecting? Another thing I like to bring always is a collection cup. This is just nice when you collect a species. You can kind of have a specimen container to take a picture of it. This is just a Lee's specimen container, a large Lee's specimen container. They run about $10 online. You may be able to find them in a fish store, but in my opinion, they're awesome to bring along. You can get really good pictures and just kind of inspect your fish and kind of go through them. If you get multiple fish in one net and you want to kind of sort them, I always like to bring a specimen container. A hat, it's nice to have a hat. I don't just wear this all the time, but I like it. But no, definitely when I'm going out there, especially down here in the heat in the summer, it's a good idea to bring a hat. In terms of footwear, I like water shoes. I like to use these water shoes because they stay on my feet, and we're in mud a lot of times, and you can kind of just sink right into the mud. And if you had boots or something that may fall off, you may lose your boots. Or if you have waders and muck get into your waders, not a good idea. I'm typically in shorts, a t-shirt, or some type of dry fit breathable shirt, And then, like I said, just these water shoes do the job for me. Also, a good idea is just I bring always a towel, and you may need some sunscreen. I'm not gonna lie, I don't always put on sunscreen. I have, and definitely when I put it on, I don't put on SPF 100. I don't know if you could tell, but I don't need SPF 100. I have gotten sunburn before, so it can happen to anybody. But this is actually Corey. He left this here. Corey's a little lighter than me, so he had the SPF 100. Speaking of Corey, I always bring this pump. You guys have probably seen them a lot. These are the Aquarium Co-op USB air pump. They're awesome because they're silent. If you want to use them in a fish room, that's great. But I like it because it's mobile, and I don't have to have a battery operated pump. I can literally utilize this, and I plug the USB end into a battery backup for a phone, like a $10 battery backup at Walmart. You plug it in, and what I usually do is I have a Lowe's bucket here that I cut a hole through. I'll feed my air line in with a little air stone, feed it into the bucket. I typically bring a 5-gallon bucket when I go collecting, and that's how I keep my fish alive for quite a few hours. We'll talk into some fish health a little bit later, but you definitely want to. It's good to have a lid for your bucket. It's good to keep your bucket in a cool area, have it aerated, and also it's not a bad idea to do water changes while you're out there collecting. Let's jump back to my sheet here to make sure I'm not missing anything. A fishing pole. Yeah, I forgot I got my fishing pole. This is actually my fishing pole from high school. I used to do a lot of fishing growing up. I haven't gone fishing in forever. I did bring this out collecting and caught a little sunfish, which is cool. I'll get into it a little later where you can microfish. There's a lot of guys on Instagram, and that's actually where I got a lot of these pictures from. These pictures you see here that we're going to get into just a bit. All these cool fish. Some of these were caught by local micro fishermen, like this guy right here. You see he's like a little bobber. They're catching little nano fish on micro hooks and stuff. So that's definitely another aspect of collecting and kind of micro fishing that is out there. Excuse me. If you guys are joining us for the first time tonight, this is not a gimmick. When I drink these gallons of water from Publix, big shout out to Publix. We had to talk about that last stream. That's what I do. I drink water. I drink water by the gallon. That's what I do. Also, a canoe or kayak, obviously not necessary, but I've had a lot of fun and success utilizing a kayak and canoe lately. The collecting, you might have seen a recent video that my friend Jose and I did where we caught a female pygmy sunfish, and we utilized the canoe and kayak to kind of cover more ground. So that's definitely an option, although there are plenty of spots that you can get to just from the shore, just from the shore. Let's jump into some fish now. I know that's why everybody likes to get into. And these are all native fish. As a matter of fact, every single one of the species you're going to see tonight is in my 55-gallon tank in the living room. That's a disaster right now. So would it be a good idea to wear one of those piece backless bikini because it ride up? Oh, Jay, if we go collecting and you're in a bikini, man, I'm getting that on film. So if we start down here, that's a sailfin molly. These two fish are sailfin mollies. That's a male that my friend Jose and I collected. And the one down there is a female that, as you can see, was caught on actually a tiny, tiny little hook by a guy I know, Species Spotlight, on Instagram. You can see down here, a lot of these photos, big shout out to Zane over at species.spotlight on Instagram. He's a local scientist. He's a young kid in his 20s. I think he's in college, but he's very, very knowledgeable. He actually gave me a crash course lesson on melanistic fish earlier today. So when we get to melanistic fish, we're gonna try to drop some knowledge on you. But Zane is a really cool dude, and big shout out to him. Check him out on Instagram, species.spotlight. A lot of these photos are courtesy of him. These two fish over here are some of my favorite local native fish. There's actually a killifish called a bluefin killifish. These are males. They get this kind of blue fins and blue and red fins and this golden color. Up top of me, you see some darters. These are swamp darters. This is actually one that I took a picture of in my 55-gallon tank. And then this one over here is one that Zane caught on a hook. I'm going to turn this light off real quick and see if that helps with anything. I think I might have been getting washed out a bit. Let me see. I appreciate you guys kind of bearing with me as I thought last week went off without a hitch. So I was like, oh man, I got this thing. No technical difficulties for me. I was here like 30 minutes early, and sure enough, I'm trying to go live and connect it. It wasn't connecting, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me. This fish over here is a metallic shiner. That's what was in that last collecting video we found a ton of. Really, really cool fish. They are a little more fragile than some of these other fish, not as hardy, but definitely something that I've had success keeping in home aquaria. These are those two fish I was talking about, the gambusia or mosquito fish, and then least keely fish. So these are probably the two most common fish that we run into down here in Florida, at least. And I know they're found in a lot of the southeast United States, and they're pretty prevalent. The least keely fish is a really cool fish. They are the smallest live-bearer in the world. The males and females are slightly different. The females get probably twice as big as the males. Very peaceful, awesome in a planted tank. The gambusia, same thing. Actually, they give them out for mosquito control here in Florida, so they're everywhere. Let's take a look at the next set of fish we have here. These are all Fundulus crisis, grassy peak. I got you, man. Just wait, man. Just wait. They're coming. They're coming. They're right here. Starting at the bottom left, we have these flagfish. Now, as I was saying, these are one of my favorite fish. It's that fish that's in the sticker right here, and also it's in this sticker, which you can pick up if you go to wildfishtanks.com and then the Teespring. You can get these stickers. I made them flagfish. There's a bluefin keely fish. There's also a cherry shrimp right here, which matches the shirt. Any Seinfeld fans out there? Anybody? And then it's also the fish that's on my logo, on the Wild Fish Tanks logo. These little ones are actually least keely fish, and that guy right there is a flagfish. So definitely representing the native fish on the on the Wild Fish Tanks logo. Where is it? There we go. I'll switch to 6 screens. So keep it moving with these fish. The top left corner, Mad Tom catfish. I actually have 2 of these in a 10-gallon tank outside, and that is one that Zane caught on a hook. And we're talking about like a little tiny fish, guys, but really cool species. These are actually poisonous. They're not gonna, they're not deathly poisonous. However, I've been told, I haven't been stung by one. I've been told if you do get pricked, it's like the baddest bee sting you've ever had for an hour or 2. Right above me is a golden top minnow. That's a male. Amazing fish. The females are a little more dull in color, but still a pretty fish in my opinion. I have a nice fat sausage female out there that I'm trying to breed, and a male with these red colorings. Really cool, amazing fish. These over here in this top right corner, those fish are pretty much the holy grail of fish. In terms of my fish buddies, those are a pygmy sunfish. There's a few different species down here. I'm not sure exactly what those are. I think that's Ocoee. That one at the top may be a Gulf Coast pygmy sunfish, but they're very tiny, very bright fish. The drawback to them is they really do require some live foods. Most of these fish that we've talked about, they adapt to the home aquaria really well. Flake food I have them on. These Mad Tom catfish, I try to feed them some frozen foods as well. But these guys over here, live grinderworms. The female I have, live grinderworms, that's all she gets. I've tried a few other things like some frozen foods. I have not been able to get her to bite on them yet. But the pygmy sunfish, definitely live foods. And then that crayfish, believe it or not, I don't know if it's a native species, to be honest, or if it's an invasive, but that is a crayfish in my 55-gallon tank as we speak that I collected myself here in local waters, and it's got this kind of cool bluish color. Heads up on those, they will tear apart all of your plants. They're going to tear apart your plants, no doubt about it. Big shout out to Manfish Diva for sharing that. Candy, if you guys don't know, Candy's an amazing mod. She's been a part of the fish fam community here on YouTube forever, being very supportive to tons of channels, and she's going through a tough time right now. So there's a GoFundMe for her. So definitely check that out. Moving forward with the fish here. Now this is really cool. I mentioned some melanistic fish, and you may recognize that fish from the thumbnail. That is actually a picture from MB Species on Instagram. Big shout out to him. And these fish, they're not all melanistic, but these fish are what can be considered melanistic. So these fish, the bottom left fish, these are some more golden top minnows, but as you can see, they got some kind of black spots in them. This is a mosquito fish or a gambusia, but it's got black spots. Those are sailfin mollies, all sailfin mollies, but as you can see, black spots. Now, up until today, I thought that all melanistic fish or all fish like this with black spots were melanistic. But it was explained to me by Species Spotlight, aka Zane, and he knows his stuff. He said that only males can be melanistic. So this male sailfin molly may be melanistic, but there's also a chance that these mollies get their black spotting from aquarium strains that have been released into the wild, which is kind of cool, but actually really unfortunate. So, as you know, I'm sure you know, a lot of molly strains in the fish store may have some black spots, right? If someone were to release that into the wild, they could mate with the wild population of mollies and then result in some type of, marbling color. However, this fish, which I collected myself, I believe that is a melanistic male. So it wasn't mated with any type of fish from an aquarium. That's just a random gene mutation out in the wild. It's just a really cool thing. Every once in a while, you pick up a fish and it's a golden top minnow, but it looks like that, or it's a gambusia, it looks like that. Just a kind of a cool thing that I didn't know existed until I started collecting fish. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I know tons about them, but it's just a really cool and interesting deviation / alteration of what different species you may find. Yeah, appreciate you guys. If you hit the like button, it does help out a ton. I know I get caught up and just kind of watch sometimes and forget to hit the like button. So please and thank you. Hitting the like button definitely does help the channel out a lot. These cool fish are all invasive species. So these are all fish that were collected here in Florida waters, but are invasive. And we're gonna open it up, not wrap it up. We're gonna open it up to questions here soon. I'm trying to peruse the chat a little bit, but down here we have a bunch of population of wild platies. I believe they're variatus platies. This big swordtail is actually still in my tank right now. He's a big beast in there with a few females. These are some platies that, like I said, once again, these are not native fish. These are fish that I've collected and my friends have collected, but they are not native fish. They are invasive. They were released into our waterways down here. This over here is a convict cichlid, a standard convict cichlid. We found a breeding population of them in a stream right in downtown Orlando, which is really unfortunate, to be honest, because there wasn't many native fish. We didn't really see many of the gambusia and the least keely fish. This right here is obviously not a real pleco, but that is like a statue of a pleco that was at a place we went collecting, and these guys are unfortunately kind of released into our waterway, and they've been breeding out of control and kind of just tearing up apart the natural springs. And that's another platy up there that I collected in the wild. Beautiful fish. You'd think you got it at a pet store, but that was collected here in the wild. So let me see here. I'm sure I missed a few things. I want to talk about fish health, because collecting fish is one thing, but obviously getting them back to your aquarium, make sure they survive, is a whole different thing. Those probably aren't found any further north in Orlando, you think? Yeah, it is true that, as you get further north, the temperatures, as they get cooler, less and less species can survive. That's one of the reasons why down here in Florida, it's a big thing. Native or invasive fish species, but also invasive like the python. A lot of species can survive the winter down here because it doesn't get so harsh. So especially if you live in a southern climate, more tropical climate, you have to really be aware of what you're releasing into the wild, aka don't release anything, because it does have an actual decent chance to survive. And I know you're thinking, oh, I can't take care of my fish anymore. I can just, give it a nice home, but that's not good. Yes, thank you, MFD Diva. Tag me. If you tag me, I'll be able to get to your question much easier. One fish, two fish. Liz says, do you try to maintain the native water parameters in the tanks you collected are kept? How much do you filter those tanks? Great question. I don't necessarily try to mimic them exactly. I have tested the pH and the temperature range. I do keep my 55-gallon tank in the house, not heated, because the waters down here, even though we live in Florida, they can survive cooler temperatures and over winter down here. These are not South American fish. They're still North American fish, even though we live in the south of North America. So I don't go too crazy trying to match pH. I still use tap water. I use tap water on all my tanks. I don't mess around with pH or with RO systems at all. As far as filtering is concerned, I like to use hang-on back filters. Some of my tanks, like my flagfish tank, does just have a sponge filter, and those guys are species only because they can be a terror, especially the males. Now I do have a few small females growing out in my 55-gallon complete native setup, but I'm going to keep an eye on those female flagfish and see how feisty they get with some of the other species in there, because I love flagfish, but they can be a little bit nasty. Let's see here. Question from Jay Aquafunk. Have you heard of other types of plecos other than the common one, like bushy nose or anything like that? Good question. I haven't, and I actually did collect a little tiny pleco when I went out a few weeks back, but he ended up not making it, so I'm not really sure what type of pleco that was. Maybe if I have a chance, I can show, I have some footage of it, I can show it to someone who may know a little more than me about local species, whether it be invasive or native. I don't think any plecos are native here, so I'm pretty sure it was an invasive pleco. It's just a matter of, I'm not sure if it was a common one, if it was a bushy nose or whatever, but I haven't heard of anything other than those like the common pleco. And if I'm not mistaken, the common pleco is actually like 2 or 3 different species, but that armored catfish that we all know as the common pleco is the only one that I've heard of. I can't wait to finish my wild fish tank. It currently has a dollar sunfish and some spotted mosquito fish. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you could collect native fish in terms of like larger sunfish, and there's even people keep bass in a lot of larger scale. I don't get into that, but the dollar sunfish definitely sounds cool. Nice hat. Oh, thanks. Hey, have any piranhas been found in Florida? That's a great question. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I can't answer that. At wild fish tanks, how low does it get in the garage during the summer? It gets low, but I do have the garage insulated. The tanks, they don't dip too low. The only tanks that I heat in the summer are going to be my tanks with like the clown loaches, the stuff that needs to be like above 80. But my bristlenose plecos, they're fine at 70, 68. I've seen the water, in the high 60s, low 70s, and I'm monitoring it. But if it dipped any lower than 69, 68, then I would throw a heater in there, even for some of my more hardy species. What do you put in your HOB? Lava rock, sponges? Good question. I keep my HOBs fairly simple. I'm a cheaper kind of budget guy, so I do a lot of I do some polyfill and sponges. I like sponges, I like polyfill, and I like some type of ceramic media. I've used sponges from the dollar store, legitimately, like those little scrubby sponges. I've used like the sponges, like the nice sponges that come in the fluval hang-on backs. In my opinion, surface area is surface area, so they all kind of work. Yes, piranhas are found in South Florida, at least have been put on the list of Florida invasives. Yeah, I believe that. Another one is jewel cichlids. I believe Jay Aquafunk Aquatics has caught some jewel cichlids. And I just saw someone on Instagram, it was either earlier today or yesterday, post that they were catching jewel cichlids like by me in Central Florida. And before that, I had heard of them only out in Tampa and like south of me in kind of like southern Central Florida. But I believe someone was confirming them in like northern Central Florida. Beautiful fish, a jewel cichlid, but just just shouldn't be here. It just shouldn't be here, and it's competing with, you know, the native fish, which are beautiful in their own right. What's the best way to get them home alive, acclimated to your tank? A portable air pump. Yes, I was going to talk about fish health. I recommend, where did I put it? The an air pump. You can use a battery operated one, but I like the USB operated one from Aquarium Co-op. I just plug this into a phone charger, like a phone battery backup, and it's good to go. I literally just thread the hose through here. I use a little bubbler, little air stone there, and it tends to keep fish, well for a long period of time. Another, I guess was mentioning earlier, whatever your collection container is, whether it's a bucket, whether you're like my buddy Jose and you repurpose some stuff from your business, okay, or you can use some styro containers. Big shout out to my LFS aquascaping supply for hooking me up with some of these styro containers. These are really good in terms of being able to transport fish. And your LFS may have them on hand because they get them when they buy fish. Typically they'll come in those styro containers. So a big shout out to Kevin and Rick over at Aquascaping Supply. But some species are more fragile than others. You definitely want to keep your water in the shade. Typically when you're out collecting, and once again I'm speaking from a perspective of Florida, you have to worry about the temperatures raising too high, getting too warm. So you want to be doing water changes to keep the water cool and keeping your bucket or your container in a shady, cool area. Those shiner species, in my opinion, have been a lot more fragile. The coastal shiner and the metallic shiner, extremely fragile. Typically the gambusia, the least keely fish, the flagfish, a lot of these fish you see here on this screen, except for that one in the top right, are very hardy. These darters do pretty well transporting. The bluefin keely fish, the mollies, the male mollies. Let me make this a point. The larger male mollies, they do not tend to do well. Okay, I've collected 2 larger male mollies, and I've collected 3 and I've lost 2. So I'm done collecting large male mollies. I do have one that's kind of medium sized and some females, and a buddy of mine has been able to breed them. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm done collecting mollies, period. Maybe if I find like a really cool melanistic one or something, but I kind of have what I need. And if I want to breed them, I want to keep them. I have a really cool male that I like. He's got that blue fin. But definitely, if you're going to be in, collecting, the male mollies tend to be very delicate, not necessarily in transportation, but during acclimation. Whereas these shiners, these melanistic shiners and these coastal shiners, they may kind of really fall apart on you and pass away during the transportation if you don't have, if you're not keeping an eye on them. But the male mollies usually do good, but in the acclimation process, I've lost 2 of them, once I've got them home after like a day or 2. These fish, where is it? These fish also acclimate fairly well. The pygmy sunfish, the one that I've collected, seem to do fairly well. The golden top minnows, which is a true keely fish, seems to acclimate fairly well. Same as these mad toms. I did not do anything special. I acclimated them how I acclimate all of my fish for the most part, and that is to simply take the water they were in, so in this case, the wild river water, float them in a container similar to this. This is a microworm culture, but not one with a microworm culture in it, but it's just a smaller container, and float that container in the tank, and then simply slowly add water from the tank into that container every 10 minutes or so over the course of 30 minutes to an hour. And then what I'll do is not add any of that water into the tank. Take all that water in the fish, pour it over a bucket and a net, and then just simply take that fish and put it into the aquarium. And that's not only how I acclimate the native fish, but it's how I acclimate most fish that I receive. I lived in Auburndale for 3 years. Unfortunately, I never got to go collecting myself. I would love to have some Florida flagfish and mollies to add to my aquarium. Yeah, I'm trying to remember where Auburndale is. Yeah, flagfish are awesome. The only downside is the males can get a little aggressive, and the mollies, you just kind of have to worry about the males in transporting. What is the prize fish you've caught so far? I would say that has to be the pygmy sunfish. Jose and I collected a female. We have yet to collect a male, but even just the female was it was just awesome. It was kind of a culmination of months and months of build up and a few trips, maybe about a dozen trips out, and it was just awesome to finally get that. And now the next big step is going to be a male pygmy sunfish. Other than that, I would say probably the male sailfin molly, because the male sailfin molly is beautiful. Hey, thank you, Kendall, over at Otter Creek Aquatics. Big shout out to you. He's got a cool channel. Check him out if you're not familiar with Kendall over at Otter Creek. Thanks for the $5. Digging the hat. Keep up the good work. Thank you, man. I'm not sure I live 4 hours, but haven't made it out there. I'm sure they probably do. I live in Pensacola. Oh, you're up in the Panhandle. Up in Pensacola, man. That's where they have the elusive the pygmy sunfish, the coastal pygmy sunfish, the Elisoma gilbertii. It's a really, really, really cool pygmy sunfish. Let me talk real quick about kind of locations and stuff like that, because that's another thing I get asked a lot is, man, where do you find these things? How do you get to these locations? My biggest tip would be befriend Ocoee Aquatics, aka Jose. If he's awesome. I don't think he's here tonight. He's got a YouTube channel, Ocoee Aquatics. He's got an Instagram, which he's really more active on Instagram. But he's an awesome fish friend of mine, and he does a lot of the scouting. That being said, you'd be surprised where you can find fish, at least here in Florida. If you look at any random ditch, and I'm talking ditch, like 6 inches of water, a foot of water, that's where I've collected a lot of these flagfish. A lot of these golden top minnows has been in these side ditches. I'll give away one of the secrets. Over by the airport, there's a series of canals and just drainage ways, and those things are teeming with least keelies, gambusia, darters. You know, depending on what little section seems to have its own little kind of population of this fish or that fish. So it's really cool to kind of just pop over there, and it's like, what? This is really here. But a lot of times, you know, it's like regular fishing, right? It's like no one wants to share their spots. And typically when I make a video, I don't broadcast to everyone this is exactly where it's at. That's for a few reasons. Like, I don't know. I just keep it close to your chest. I don't really know people. I obviously someone could go there and it'd be kind of hard to wipe out an entire population of these small game fish. Most of these fish, there is a strong population. They're not endangered for the most part. There's definitely some native species that are endangered and that their populations are not as strong. But for the most part, you can at least down here in Florida, anywhere you look, you may be surprised to find a population of either native fish or invasive fish. If you have any questions, please be sure to tag me. Appreciate it. I have 5 flags in my big indoor stock tank with my comments, and everyone gets along just fine. Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know you had flagfish. It makes sense with comments with goldfish. It makes sense because goldfish can take cooler water. The flagfish can take cooler water, and the common goldfish are a beefier species. I had my flagfish at first in with some panda cories, and I'm not gonna lie, I found a couple of dead panda cories. So I promptly took the panda cories out. My flagfish also decimated a lot of my plants. I feel as if you feed them the right foods, they may not devour plants, but definitely kind of be weary that they can potentially get into your plants, the Florida flagfish. Where can I catch mosquito fish? Where are you at, Richard Belmont? Mosquito fish, they're pretty much everywhere. They're pretty much everywhere. At least down here in the southeast. Literally, you can call up, there's like some local government or whatever, and they'll give you some for your pond. They literally will give you some to control mosquitoes. Anna's Hobby says everything in my area is fenced off. That's unfortunate. There's definitely some areas where I've drove by, I'm like, oh, that'd be cool to go take a look at, but it's like a private property or it's got a fence. So that definitely is a limiting factor. You have to definitely worry about the plants for sure. not the plants. You have to worry about the fences for sure, and you have to abide by that. Don't be going where you're not supposed to. It's not worth it. You have to abide by the rules and regulation. But just going back, in case you're new or you just joined us, the plants. A lot of the laws and regulations that govern collecting fish, also collecting plants. Luckily down here in Florida, you just need your basic fishing license, and you can collect either. So it's not that hard, but it's definitely go get it. Get a license, whether you're a resident or a non-resident. Do it by the book. Don't take any chances. The one time you go out there is the one time that someone's going to stop you and you're going to get in trouble. And I don't know what the fines are, but it probably ain't pretty. And this is actually not a collecting story, but I'll tell you about my run-in with FWC, which, if you're not familiar, is the Florida Wildlife Control. Almost a year ago now, I had some albino bristlenose plecos on Craigslist, okay? And I was talking with a gentleman to come over on Friday, at the end of the week, to come take a look at them. He comes over, I'm showing him around the fish cave. Luckily for me, at the time, I had a common plecostomus in my 125, and I was just some dude. So I'm just kind of talking shop, talking fish, explaining that, some knuckleheads will release these fish, and, common plecos are an issue in the springs, yada, yada, yada. And I go ahead and I sell him the albino bristlenose pleco. Next thing I know, FWC wildlife truck comes around the corner, pops out, and asks to see my license for selling fish. I didn't have one, okay? And luckily, they were nice guys and come and give me the slap on the wrist. But it was something like a $1,500 fine. It was something fierce, okay? So whether it's selling fish, collecting fish, you may get lucky like me and get a slap on the wrist, but it ain't worth it. Literally that day I went out and got my licensure and, made myself legit, because it's not worth it. The legal way to collect aquarium plants, typically, at least in Florida here, with my licensure, with a regular fishing license, and then I have what's called a freshwater frog and fish dealer's license. That allows me to collect and sell plants and fish. But typically, there are rules and regulations regarding plants that may be wrapped up with the fish or may be separate, but there's almost always going to be laws governing the collection of plants, as well as fish. And there's invasive plants too. With the invasive plants, you can kind of harvest as much as you want because they're invasive. We have a lot of Ludwigia in the Panhandle. Yeah, there's some. I think it's red Ludwigia down here, and I believe that's invasive. There's also some some type of val. I'm not sure if it's jungle val or Italian val or val americana, whatever it is. I don't think it's native here. Let's see, anything. Drop the like. Yeah, appreciate dropping the like. Just a quick heads up. I think I mentioned it earlier in the stream when I was still muted. If you guys are coming earlier from Rob 93 stream, the moving forward, kind of the rundown, and I think Jeff Rose is going at 6 now. So moving forward on Wednesdays, which is just strictly better than the Sunday lineup. I'm just saying. But Wednesdays, it is I think Jeff Rose at 6, Rob 93 at 7. I'm going to be at 8. And then Dan's Fish is at 9. And then Thursdays, you got Aquarium Co-op and KG Tropicals. And Sunday, you got a whole slew of an amazing lineup with Susie Q, JH Aquatics. You have Aquafunk, my boy. And stay tuned. We're going to be doing a little collaboration potentially, so stay tuned for that. And then King and Queen of Cichlids, I think, rounds out the Sunday evenings. So if you're ever looking for fish, fish live streams, for sure, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday has a stacked lineup. Let me check my handy dandy sheet here just to see what we can't just cover. Excuse me. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I apologize again for the the rough start there. But at the end of the day, if you haven't been collecting out in the wild, even if you don't think in your area would be as accessible as mine potentially is, give it a shout, look into it. I get just as much enjoyment, being out there, kind of connecting with the wild. Keeping fish tanks can sometimes be considered like a lazy man's hobby. Oh, you got a fish tank in the living room and you sit there and you watch it, right? which doesn't have to be the case. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get plenty of enjoyment sitting there and watching my fish tank, but it is awesome to kind of enjoy this hobby and get out, get some vitamin D, get a little, get your toes wet, get your hands wet. And, there's definitely a special connection you have with wild fish that you've collected yourself. Keeping native fish in general is cool, but definitely kind of, being the one to have collected them, like in my 55 gallon in my living room, definitely adds a special element to it. Before I get out of here, I want to quickly mention the Guppy show in Ocala I went to this past weekend. It was an amazing time. Big shout out to the Tampa Bay Aquarium Society and the Florida Fancy Guppy Association for putting that together. It was on a horse farm, which is another one of my passions. I'd love to freaking have a horse farm. It's like a ridiculous goal, but I'd love to own a horse or have a horse farm. My big butt on a horse. But it was a guppy show. They had guppies from all over the world flown in for the show. I'm gonna have a video on it in the next week or two. And I picked up actually not one, not two, but 10 different pairs or trios of strains of guppies or endlers. So I'm going full-blown live bearer, guys. The Pleco, bristlenose Pleco factory is up and running, and the guppy factory maybe soon behind it. To see Pleco Invasion, Trouble in Bruce Springs State Park. Yeah, that's a video. Jay Adams is talking about the video that I believe it was, oh gosh, what's his name? Steve, oh gosh. He did it like about a year ago. It's got like 1 million+ views. Steve Poland Cichlids. Steve Poland Cichlids threw that video out there, and it just really kind of outlines how troubled some of the springs down here are due to the invasions, the invasion of those species. Yeah, that is a lot of guppies. I didn't even have to set up any more tanks because my bristlenose Pleco tanks, they just right now have bristlenose Plecos and like some snails, and some of them just have bristlenose Plecos. So I was able to kind of put a pair here, a trio there, and double up on kind of like an old school breeding for profit tank. If you guys have been around the fish tube for probably 2-3 years, and the whole breeding for profit craze, which is still around, I guess, but the biggest thing back in the day, I think Steenfon had a tank like this. It was just, bristlenose Plecos, cherry shrimp, and guppies, and maybe some snails thrown in there. I think there's a bunch of people who had tanks like that. The Fish Nerd has tanks like that. So I'm kind of not reinventing the wheel here. It's same old, but it's a tried and true. So it was just nice to not have to set up a bunch of new tanks. Candy is amazing. Thank you guys for the mods. I don't know why I've been thanking you guys more often. Thank you to Candy. Thank you to Liz, One Fish, Two Fish. Thank you, Aquafunk. I know Bay Area Aquatics was here earlier. I'm sure I'm Madfish Diva. Just everybody that's been watching. I appreciate you all. The goal will be next Wednesday, 8 p.m. I should be starting on time, hopefully with sound. Coming at you with sound next time from the get-go. We're going to be talking about getting budget tanks. We're going to be talking about all my tips and tricks. If you guys saw my last video, which has been phenomenal, thank you guys for watching lately. I'm assuming if you're here still live or if you're watching this on the replay, you're a true fan and supporter, and thank you. Even if you only watch every once in a while, I still appreciate it. But was not expecting that last video to do as well as it has. It's a video where I got a lot of stuff for a great deal. So next live stream, next Wednesday, a week from tonight. Hope to see you guys back here. I'm going to be talking about all my tips and tricks, where I get them, how I get them, when I negotiate, when I don't negotiate, when I do negotiate, how I negotiate, and hopefully you guys can get lucky yourself with some awesome stuff. Hey, what's up, Michael? Man, still here? No, you're good, man. You're good. Like I said, no obligation. I thank you, man. I appreciate you still being here. What's up, Big City Betas? Thank you guys for being here. Fishy Life, I've been seeing you chatting all stream long. Gonna wrap it up, guys. Definitely head over to Dan's Fish. I don't know what he's got going on tonight. Usually he does like a giveaway or something, but an awesome guy, and he's also bald like me. I've been telling Rob, I think Jeffro may have a hair follicle issue as well. So we're gonna go bald Wednesdays. if you want to stream on Wednesdays, you gotta be bald or shave your head. That's the rule going forward. But as always, guys, appreciate you guys joining me. Stay positive and stay passionate.